Good evening, dear colleagues, and welcome to our concluding lecture on research methods. In this lecture today, we're going to take a look at mixed methods research designs. What are mixed methods? Basically, it's a situation when we combine qualitative and quantitative methods in a single study or in a series of studies. And today we'll take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods approaches. And we'll also take a look at mixed method research designs. If you want to conduct a mixed method study, how do you present it? How do you write down its design? How do you explain it to reviewers and to your commission who's going to evaluate your master's work? And at the end, we'll take a quick look at person-oriented approach, just to get an idea of what this approach is about, because it's essentially a quantitative methodology, but based on a kind of qualitative ideology. So as we've just said, mixed methods is a situation when we try to combine qualitative and quantitative data collection and or data analysis procedures. And this combination can be presented either as a single study or as a research program which combines several studies focused on around more or less a single research question. And of course, in psychology, there are some research procedures that involve collection of both qualitative and quantitative data, such as repertoire grids, all kinds of research into content of motivation, and so on. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of qualitative and quantitative methods, and why on earth do we need to combine them? Well, because obviously qualitative and quantitative methods, they have different advantages. This classification comes from a paper by Johnson and Onyeugbusi from 2014, I think, where they actually summarize the strong and weak points of different types of research. Of course, if we take quantitative studies, when we apply statistics to evaluate the confidence of our conclusions, the main advantage is that the knowledge that we gain is very precise. Also, we can be very confident to what extent we can generalize our findings to different samples drawn from the same population. And another important advantage of quantitative methodology is that although some people are very scared by statistics, in principle it's very easy to apply. You have collected some data and then you just press a couple of buttons in SPSS and here you go, here's your result. And of course the possibility to test very specific hypotheses, the possibility to focus on very specific narrow constructs, the possibilities to replicate the findings are all the strong points of quantitative studies. However, quantitative statistical methodology has also important drawbacks. First of all, the most important drawback is that you can only get the information about the constructs and the variables that you have intended to measure. So essentially, you only get the information about the phenomena about which you were already aware when you were designing the study. And this is called confirmation bias, because essentially your findings will reflect back on the theory which you used to design this study. For example, if you are trying to find out which personality traits are important for certain job performance characteristics, and you use the Big Five questionnaire, you'll get the information about those Big Five personality traits. But if, in fact, completely different traits are important, but you never thought of this and you never even planned to measure them, you will never find out about this from such a study, unless you do some kind of qualitative data collection. So essentially, You only learn about what you intended to learn about. And this is confirmation bias, because you either confirm your existing theory or you fail to confirm it. But as a result, most likely your existing theory will remain. And another drawback is that the knowledge that we gain from quantitative studies might actually be very abstract, very general. It's hard to apply it to specific individuals. For example, we say, okay, the correlation between extroversion and anxiety is, for example, 0.25. Of course, I'm fantasizing. But what does it tell us about specific human beings? What kind of prognosis about the behavior of a particular person in a particular situation can we make based on this knowledge? And this is where we fail if we only use quantitative methodology. But of course, most psychological studies continue using quantitative methodology because, first of all, it's very well known, and also it's cheap and easy. It's very easy to collect some data, to do some statistics, and to present some results, and to make it publishable. If we turn to qualitative studies that we discussed about during our last meetings, qualitative studies have a different set of strong points. First of all, because qualitative studies provide us with rich information. They are appropriate to investigate and to describe complex phenomena, which may include different sites where many different variables might play a role, and where it might be even impossible to describe all those variables in advance. So using qualitative methodology, we are able to actually get a rich and multifaceted picture of reality. And this picture of reality is also expressed in the language, which is close to the language used by respondents. So it is very easy to use this information to get more awareness about the context. For example, if you conduct an interview about job performance with people who are working, you can actually maybe come up with an idea of what kind of personality characteristics, what kind of skills and abilities are essential for success in this particular job. However, there are also limitations. Although this knowledge is very rich and multifaceted, and you're unlikely to miss something important if it's really important, the drawback is that this knowledge is really imprecise, first of all. You don't measure anything with any substantial degree of precision. You are not able to test any specific hypothesis. You are not able to make any specific predictions concerning people from different samples, even coming from the same population, because normally in qualitative studies your samples are small, and you can never guarantee that they are more or less representative. And the other drawbacks that are extremely important is that the data analysis is exceptionally time consuming. It's very work intensive. It takes a lot of time to actually extract and present and describe all this rich information about reality that is contained in qualitative data. And of course, another potential disadvantage is that because most people tend to hold still a positivist image of science, quantitative studies, they seem to be more convincing in terms of how convincing their results are to policymakers, to stakeholders. Because if you say, okay, here's something that we've proven with statistics, this often has more weight in the ears of those who are listening to you compared to a statement which is based on a qualitative interview study. And of course, the results of qualitative studies can be influenced by our subjective expectations, by our subjective biases, by our assumptions about reality. This is why maybe it's a good idea to combine qualitative and quantitative studies because they have different non-overlapping strengths. So if we take a look at mixed methods research, when we actually use both methodologies, we can capitalize on the strong points of both quantitative and qualitative approaches. Because on the one hand, we can get some rich information about reality. We can be sure that we don't miss anything that is particularly important. But on the other hand, we can also use statistics. We can also gain precision in our conclusions. We can also evaluate the possibilities of replicating this study, of generalizing the results to different samples, and so on. The main challenge, the main drawback of mixed methods is, however, that it is more complex, it is more complicated. In order to conduct a mixed method study, you need to have expertise in both quantitative and qualitative methodology. And there are some people who are fans of quantitative stats, like myself. There are some people who are very experienced in qualitative methods, but it's hard to find a researcher who is skilled in both. That's why for mixed method studies, it often makes sense to team up in a group of researchers who have different expertise. So whenever you decide to conduct a mixed method study, first of all, you need to be very aware of the reasons why you decide to combine both methodologies. Why do you want to go into this whole complexity? Why do you want to complicate your life by collecting both kinds of data? And these reasons need to be clearly stated in your research proposal, in your article, or in your master's thesis. And luckily for us, Green and colleagues have come up with a list of reasons that we can use to justify the use of mixed methodology. The first reason is triangulation. Triangulation, as we discussed last time when we looked at qualitative methods, is a situation when we seek to increase our validity by cross-validating our results. For example, we can collect some data using quantitative methodology and then see if it aligns well with the findings of a qualitative study. Because essentially, if we come up with similar conclusions based on different kinds of data coming potentially from different kinds of sources, we can be more confident in the validity of our findings. Another potential reason is complementarity, when we try to enhance, to elaborate, or to complement the findings of a certain methodology. For example, you have conducted a quantitative study, but you want to really understand how do people with these particular characteristics that you have identified using qualitative methodology, how do they live, how do they perceive the world, and so on. So potentially you might go and do an interview with particular individuals that you have chosen based on their questionnaire scores to get a better idea of what's behind those score profiles that you have identified using statistics. And this way, qualitative data can complement your quantitative data. Or maybe after an experimental study, you can do a post-experimental interview and collect some qualitative data about people's strategies, people's reasons for certain choices that they made in your experiment. And this can also complement your quantitative findings by providing more context that is important to understand your results. Development is a situation when we collect qualitative and quantitative data in sequence. For example, if we want to create a questionnaire, we typically start by doing a qualitative study. We might actually do some interviews to find out something about the construct that we want to measure. For example, my colleague Alona Bonniwell, when she was interested in a new construct, satisfaction with time use, she started by finding individuals who were particularly satisfied and particularly dissatisfied with their use of time. And she conducted some interviews to identify what it is that makes this experience of having spent our time really well. And based on this phenomenological data from the interview, she has managed to create a questionnaire, and we came up with a new model of temporal well-being. And other reasons could be initiation, when we are trying to gain some new perspective using additional data obtained based on a different methodology, or expansion, when, for example, our quantitative tools that we have only allow us to measure a certain narrow range of variables that might be potentially relevant. And if we want to cover a broader range of constructs, if we want to get an information about a broader range of personality processes, then we probably need to complement these quantitative measures with some qualitative data. So these are some of the potential reasons that you can use to justify the choice of a mixed method study, because as always in science, based on the principle of Occam's razor, if you are trying to complicate your life, at least you need to have a good reason, good valid reason to do so. And of course, another reason that is not listed in this list is that mixed method studies are coming into fashion recently. So if you want to make your paper publishable, if you want to make your results more appealing to reviewers, potentially maybe it makes sense to do a mixed methods study. So if you're convinced about doing mixed method studies, let's now take a quick look at different designs that we can use if we go mixed methods.